We left off yesterday, Mishnah Hay, where Yossi ben Yochanan Yishul Shlaim says your home should be wide open. It should be easily accessible from all directions. To do hospitality similar to Avram Avinu's home, which that's the ultimate representation of chesed, that people have no difficulty entering from whatever direction they're coming. They're able to benefit from that hospitality, from the chesed. And in addition, the poor, how do you treat the poor person who normally has a sense of inferiority because of his financial predicament, because he's needy? You should treat him as a member of your household. He should feel fully at home as if he's a member of the family. That's what it says here. Now, we read the story of Avram Avinu. It was the third day after he was circumcised. It was the hottest day of the year. Not the year, the hottest day in the history of the world. Because Avram was 99 years old, and Hashem wanted him to have a respite, had to recover from his surgery, from the Mila, from the circumcision. And Avram was beside himself because there were no wayfarers to host, to do his hospitality. And when Hashem saw that he was pained by this, he sent three wayfarers, three angels in human form, and he didn't know that they were angels. He runs towards them, but before he goes and he runs to them and pleads with them to accept his hospitality, and he prostrates himself, Hashem was engaged with a conversation with him. And he takes a break from this conversation with Hashem to attend to the needs of these seemingly needy people. I mean, it's unheard of. I mean, here Hashem is communicating. This is a prophecy. And he says, excuse me, I have to take care of these wayfarers, these beggars walking down the street, whoever they are. So I have to take a break. Seemingly it's a disrespect. How do you do such a thing? Evidently, if Avram Avinu did it, it's an indication that this is something so special that greater is the mitzvah of hosting a person doing chesed than receiving the divine presence. Because if divine presence is the ultimate, Avram wouldn't have interrupted his conversation with Hashem, his audience with Hashem. Why did he interrupt? Because Hashem says that is more important. It's more important than the Shekhinah. That's how important it is. So if a person opens his home and he turns it into a hospitality center, and the hospitality is within the context which conforms with Torah law and Torah values. What is that? That hospitality, what was Avram's hospitality? He didn't speak about, what's going on in Las Vegas, what's going on in the casino. He spoke about monotheism. He spoke about spiritual concepts, basic morals, ethics, and perspective of purpose in life. So if your hospitality, that is the context of your hospitality, that has greater value than receiving the divine presence. So when you open your house, be so welcoming to do chesed, and you do chesed that the poor people who are needy, the beneficiaries of the chesed, and simultaneously, the way they're the recipients of the chesed, they're treated as royalty, as family, where they don't feel in any way lesser than anyone else. They feel fully comfortable there. Being able to do that is something phenomenal. It's something exceptional. My mashgiach, Zechron Baruch, once said over, there was a person in Europe a few hundred years ago. His name was Reb Leibel Chosid. Why was he called Reb Leibel Chosid? Because he was able always to innovate new approaches to do mitzvahs in a very novel way. For instance, when people would come to his home, he would have guests, he would light candles. In honor of his guests, so people ask him, why are you lighting candles? So he explained them. We know in a shul, during the tefillah, you have candles on the amud, on the location where the shlich tzibur leads the congregation in the service. And one time he had candles, whether it was a a paraffin candle, whether it was an oil candle. Today we have lights very often. Why do you light lights? Because, or you have a ner tomid, you have the eternal light burning in the shul, the beis medrash, which is an indication the Shechina, the divine presence, is always there. Because a beis medrash or a beis hakneses is a semblance of the beis hamikdash, of the temple. As in the temple, the Shechina was there. So when the Shechina is there, you have lights. So he said, if hosting a person is greater than receiving the divine presence, for the divine presence, you light lights. You should light lights when you have guests, when you do hospitality, because Hashem values it to that degree. So that was his innovative mitzvah, which he created, which he established. When guests would come to his home, he would light candles, not to create the mood. It's only because the innate value of what's taking place, it's no less than a Kabbalas Pnei Shechina, receiving the divine presence. There's a question which is asked by the Chafetz Chaim. The Mishnah tells us in Pirkei Avos, Schar v'al maleka, that the innate value of every mitzvah, even the most ordinary mitzvah, is so unending. There's not enough reward in the physical world to compensate the person for the value of the mitzvah he had done. So that's meaning schar v'al maleka. There's no such thing as reward for mitzvah in this world. We have certain things, the principles for the world to come, but the Peruseim, the Yusuf is in this world. But that is not the principle. The principle is the world to come. Hashem gives us extra to make life easier for us, to facilitate mitzvos. It should come with less difficulty. But the actual principle is the world to come. That has no relevance to this world. So he asks a question, the Chafetz Chaim, we just read in Veschanon, in the Ten Commandments, Mishalom l'sonov aponav lavido. God, he rewards his enemies in this world to fully compensate them, so they should go into the oblivion when they die. Meaning, once they pass away, God has paid whatever they're worthy of. So when they come to the world to come, there's no place for them, because they're fully rewarded and compensated in this world. Mishalem l'sonov aponav lavido. He pays his enemies in their presence, lavido. They should go into a destroyed state, into the oblivion. So Chafetz Chaim asks, but if the innate value of a mitzvah cannot be rewarded in this world, how does he pay the evil person his reward in this world? It's only a pittance compared to what it's actually worth. That's the question the Chafetz Chaim asks. Rabbi Shosalant asked the question also. I'll tell you Rabbi Shosalanta's answer and the Chafetz Chaim's answer. So Rabbi Shosalanta says like this: person is a hedonist, a glutton, and he could write any check, and he would write any check for that physical material desire, because a hedonist goes into a restaurant and he says, I want the most expensive thing on the menu. They said, something, it'll cost you $50,000. In reality, it's not worth more than $5. But because of his gluttonous desire, he says, something, to satisfy my desire, I could afford it, I'll pay $50,000. He says, I have a lot more where that comes from. People are amazed. You're willing to give it away, that much money, what you can do so much with, for this material, which it has no innate value. It's so fickle and so temporary. And it says, something, when it comes to my needs, my desires, sky's the limit. He pays. And that's the way he lives his life. So who's a Rasha? Who does Hashem send into the oblivion? He says, I have no interest in having a relationship with you, Hashem. I have no relation. This world is my location. This is primary. What you're about, it's not even secondary. If that's the case, whatever I'm worth, I'm fully investing in this world. Hashem says it's going to be very costly. Doesn't make, you're going to pay a king's ransom. He says, I could afford a king's ransom. And he pays the king's ransom. So what happens after he passes away? There's nothing left. But you can't be rewarded. It has such infinite, unlimited. You took the unlimited and you invested in the finite, and it's fully, you've expended it all. You depleted everything. You have no assets left. You had infinite access, unlimited, and you depleted it and exhausted it in this finite location. When the man dies, it's over. And that account closed. Therefore he goes into the oblivion. That's the Rabbi Shol Slanter's answer. The Chofetz Chaim answers differently. He answers it like this, very interesting. And he answers it with a mashal, with an allegory. There was this person, he was a first-class counterfeiter. And he counterfeited $500,000 rubles in Russia. And literally, he counterfeited millions and millions of dollars of rubles. It was worth a fortune. Okay? And if you looked at the counterfeited bill document, you couldn't tell. Even the greatest expert couldn't tell. It was done so perfectly. So what does he do? This man has the ultimate level of chutzpah. He takes a trunk load of these counterfeit bills, and he takes it to the Minister of Treasury in Leningrad, because that's where, because no bank has enough money to exchange these bills into smaller cash, to smaller bills. He goes there, he has an appointment, and he tells him that he's a, whatever you want to call him. This is before the oligarchs, before then. He's come with this suitcase, this trunk of literally millions and millions of dollars worth of rubles, presents a sample. The Minister of Treasury looks at it, lifts it up, examines it. He says, I want to tell you something. If you don't leave within 5 minutes, you're going for a firing squad. We're going to kill you. Where do you have the audacity to come to me with all this counterfeit rubles and tell me it's worth millions and millions of dollars? Where do you have the chutzpah? That's what he's talking about. You tell me the difference between that and any other ruble. You couldn't tell the difference. It's not counterfeit. He denies it's not counterfeit. He says it is counterfeit. He says, you're talking to the expert. I'm the Minister of Treasury. He says, how do you know? He says, I can tell you how I know. Because if you take the ruble, the authentic ruble is printed on paper that it has the watermark of the czar. So when you lift up the paper to the light, it's not what's printed on the paper, it's the watermark on the paper that it's the czar's insignia. Your paper does not have that insignia. That's how I know it's counterfeit. It's not the real thing. Therefore, it's not even worth the paper it's printed on. You want good advice? Leave now, because if you don't leave, your life will end very soon. Okay? So Chofetz Chaim says, the person is philanthropic. Chesed. Why? I'm a humanitarian. I love dogs. I love animals. I love people. I love myself. I'm morally, ethically attuned, naturally. It has nothing to do with God. It's me. And he does chesed, endless chesed, because he doesn't believe in the divine. He did mitzvah. He fed the poor. He supported education, built all kinds of infrastructure for communities. But why did he do it? It emanated from where? It emanated from the finite. If it's finite, so finite doesn't produce something which is infinite. Therefore, you can be paid off. But when you do chesed, because Hashem said you have to do chesed, so that chesed, that charity, whatever you do is rooted in where? It's rooted in the infinite. When it's rooted in the infinite, that is the impetus. And that's the motivation. The result of that action, it takes on a classification of unlimited. That cannot be paid in this world. So when the Mishnah in Pirkei Avos tells us, Schar Ba'al Maleko, that's reward for a mitzvah. When you're doing it as God's dictate, as God's commandment. So when it's connected to the infinite, it has infinite value. When it's connected to the finite, it's me, who I am, what I believe, ethical, moral, humanitarianism, all that, it's limited. That kind of person Hashem pays off in this world, and it's a full payment. At the end of the day, there's nothing left. But if you root it in the infinite, that cannot be paid off in this world. That's what Chafetz Chaim says. Why? Because Avram Avinu, that's why he did chesed. Now, what was the objective of Avram's chesed? When he interrupted the conversation with the Malachim, with the angels, with God to host the angels. What was the discussion? The discussion was perspective. What's it all about? Is it me or is it somebody else? The Medrash tells us when Avram would finish hosting his guests royally, they would say, "Thank you, Master Avram." He says, "You thank the wrong one. I'm not the master." He said, "What are you talking? You're not the master. You have all this wealth, you have all this power." He says, "I'm not the one. There's somebody above me." And then he entered into this theological discussion. There's a creator, there's a master, there's a power that dictates every aspect of this existence. By the end of the day, by the end of the night, the person was a committed monotheist. So what was the milieu? What was the spirit? What was the discussion of the hospitality? It was a means to an end. Your home should be open from any direction. People are welcome. And if you have your home with that perspective, and you treat the poor as if they're members of your household, which it represents humility, tremendous humility, then that generates the infinite. Then it's Schar Ba'al Maleko. And that's Gedol HaChnos Orchem Yosef Mi Kabbalas Pnei HaShechina. First name was a Jew. His name was Albert. He was a Spanish Portuguese Jew. At that time, he was in his upper 60s. And by training, he was a lawyer. But he was the best jeweler in New York City. Became a jeweler. And somebody brought him to a class. And he was a man in his upper 60s. He had a very, very caustic personality. Very. And he starts coming to class, and he considers himself, this great intellectual. And he says, Rabbi, doesn't make any sense. And he said it the way it doesn't make any sense. I said, Albert, it makes sense. You don't understand. With time, you'll understand. So what happened? After a while, it started to make sense. He bought himself an art scroll Gemara, Bava Metzia. He was studying Bava Metzia at the time. And now he's into the thick and thin of Talmud. Again, Rabbi, I have a degree, undergraduate in economics. And we're learning, what's constant and what's fungible, all this. Rabbi, it doesn't make sense. Monetary systems, supply, demand, all this kind of thing. I said, it makes sense. You have to study a little more. When you study a little more, you'll see it makes sense. And it's only due that you don't understand. Eventually, he says to me, Rabbi, could you buy me a pair of tefillin? I'd like to pray. I said, no problem. I said, does price make a difference? He says, no. Whatever it cost, I'm happy to pay for it. I bought him a pair of tefillin those years for over $900. And I bought him the tefillin. And every day he's coming, not once a week, every day he's coming to class, every day for an hour. And he's putting on his tefillin. And one day we were having the class, and there were a number of people there between 9 and 10 o'clock. And he says to me, and all of a sudden he came down with prostate cancer. and he had difficulty. Eventually, it compromised his health. So when he had to walk, we were on 63rd Street, he'd have to walk up the first flight. He had to like pull himself up the banister to get to the first floor. We didn't have an elevator in the building. Okay. His health is deteriorating. And one day we're in the middle of the shear, and he says to me, out of nowhere, Rabbi, will you bury me? That's the question he asked me. Rabbi, will you bury me? I said, Albert, with God's help, you're going to live a long life. Don't be so pessimistic. He says, Rabbi, truly, if I die, will you officiate at my funeral? That's the question he asked me. So I said to him, Albert, if it's an Orthodox service and you adhere to all the laws which are prescribed by Orthodox Judaism, I will officiate. If not, I will not officiate. That's what I said to him. Okay. Fast forward 3 months later, I get a call. Can I come see him at his apartment? He lived off Park Avenue. I come in. It's maybe his second or third marriage. He's a member of Temple Emmanuel. And he has a night table like you have in a hospital. And it's piled up with about 10 art scroll Gemaras, piled high, right next to his hospital bed. And on top of the pile of Gemaras, he has his pair of tefillin. Here. And his wife must be about 20 years younger than he is. And he says to me, there's nothing kosher in this house. Nothing except what you see on this night table. That's the only thing Jewish in this house. My wife was born in France before the war. She caught the last boat out of Cherbourg. I'm not know if I'm pronouncing it right, French. And she came to the United States. And I'm going to call her in now, and I'm going to give her instructions that when I pass away, exactly what she has to be agreeable to. So he calls her in. He says, you see this rabbi? He's an Orthodox rabbi. He's my teacher. When I die, it has to be according to the Orthodox tradition. Preparation for burial, pine box, no shoes, no tuxedo, shrouds, everything. And the actual interment has to be done by Jews, to be interred in the ground. She says, are you kidding? You mean you don't want a tuxedo? You don't want embalming? No, whatever the rabbi says, that's what goes. Finished. Okay? Passes away. We have the funeral at Campbell's. Campbell's funeral, it's up on Upper East Side. It's a non-sectarian location. And I say a eulogy. I start speaking about the Talmud and how he advanced in Judaism when he started this, and he even taught himself how to read Aramaic and understand Aramaic. He was a very smart person. And all his family, every one of them, his nephews and nieces were intermarried, married to non-Jews. And his nieces, they looked like Kennedys. They had that kind of look, like a Kennedy look, like they just came out of Hyannis, you know? And each of them was carrying like a dog on their arm, like very, very wealthy people. And we went to the it was a graveside funeral, burial. So after I was coming back, I was in a limousine with these nieces, the non-Jews. And they said, Rabbi, it's just unbelievable. We thought the concepts you present, we thought that was Christianity. We didn't realize the Jewish concepts, Jewish beliefs. I mean, you believe in angels? You believe in the world to come? We never knew that Jews believed in that. We thought that was a Christian belief. We didn't realize that's a Jewish belief. So I said to them, don't you realize, what do you think it's called? Judeo-Christian. It's called Judeo-Christian because many of the fundamental beliefs in Christianity are rooted in Judaism. So the concept of world to come, the concept of angels, the concept of purgatory, that a person goes to spiritual hell and whatever it is, this is part of Judaism. They had a greater interest in Judaism than the Jews, than the Jewish husbands. You understand? But I'm just saying, here you have Gentiles, you present something, you touch them, they want to know more about it. More about it. So if you're sitting next to a Jew And the Jew has no biases. He's open-minded. And you're able to just introduce him to a concept, which seems to be interesting, which will gain his curiosity. You have an opportunity, can make a difference in his life. And you want to know something? After 120 years, you don't know when you could have made a difference and you didn't make a difference. And Hashem will say, do you remember that train ride from New York and you stopped off in Philly and the person was on the train with you for those 2 hours? You could have said something and you didn't say anything. Why? You could, if you would have said, it would have made a difference in this person's life. And the many things we wouldn't even recall. We just gloss over it. But the endless opportunities that we could do things. Opportunities which are not to be believed, the ramifications and the consequences of those opportunities. And therefore, you have to keep your eyes wide open and be sensitive to when you could do and when you can't do. And you don't say anything which should not be said, but if you could say something which has value, then make sure to say what you're supposed to say. A person who's well-weathered in doing deals, he has a sixth sense that whatever deal presents itself, he's right there. Why? Because it's so embedded in his emotion mind to do that deal. He doesn't have to think much. He almost like gravitates towards the deal. If the forefront of your mind is to do Hashem, to do Kiddush Hashem, to be a role model for other Jews, what Judaism is, and to attract people, to be involved, or to at least be curious of what it's about. You do whatever you can to be that role model, to be that representation, to be the person for information, to be able to share with these people. That's what you do. I was once sitting on a plane, I was flying to St. Louis many years ago, and there was this man, he must have been in his 50s. I was in my upper 20s, and he's a missionary. And he sees I have a beard, I'm wearing a yarmulke, not a skull cap, not like the cardinal, a purple, whatever they call it, wearing a black yarmulke. And he's trying to sell me a bill of goods, what he believes in. I said, excuse me, I'm a Jew, I'm a rabbi, I have no interest in your discussion. The man was aggressive. He sees I'm a rabbi. I'm an observant Jew. He's trying to sell me his bill of goods. It's not something, what about shame? It's almost shameful, your behavior. Wait a minute, he's doing for what he believes in. No shame. So when we definitely have no reason to be shameful, where what's the name? It's your fellow Jew. It's only saving him. Giving an opportunity, you're saving his soul, you're giving him purpose and value in existence. How do you not enter make some kind of remark that he'll walk away with something positive? That maybe he'll follow up. And today, everything you could Google, there's nothing you can't Google on the internet. Any subject matter, any language, whatever it is. You just have to open his eyes slightly. He goes home, he opens the computer, he can do his own research on what it is.